Well, it's great to see all of you. I think this is one of our largest turnouts so far, so thanks so much for coming. This is ProductTank, so hopefully you're coming for ProductTank. Tonight we have a couple really exciting talks from Kristen Berman and Logan Ury, who are both behavioral scientists. Logan is a user experience researcher at Airbnb right now. And Kristen is the co-founder of Common Sense Lab and Irrational Lab. Did I get that right?
Yeah, nailed it.
Excellent. And this is a bit of a reunion tour for them because they both worked at Google on the founding team of the behavioral science labs, where they both worked with Dan and Ariely. You may know from TED Talks and the book Predictably Irrational. And before we get to our talks, we have a couple things. We'll have Jan Schiffman, who's the VP of Engineering at TIBCO Jaspersoft, who's been kind enough tonight to sponsor our event. So a big hand to Jan and to Eric, Shane, and Dave, who have put this together and got the food, who checked you in. So big round of applause for TIBCO. All right, so I'm going to ask a few quick questions here to understand who you are and why you're here. So first of all, how many of you have been to a ProductTank event before? Excellent. And what do you all do? How many of you are product managers? How many of you are founders or entrepreneurs? Designers? Developers? Sales and marketing?
Students.
What else? Students?
Research.
Research? And how many of you are here to look for your next job or your next play? Everyone close their eyes. And a couple quick questions from our speakers. How many of you have run an experiment recently to learn something new about your company or your product or your users? How many of you have run more than one experiment? Excellent. And finally, how many of you have experience with behavioral science? How many know what it is? Excellent. So I think we'll learn that all tonight. So without further ado, Jan Schiffman's going to kick us off with a quick introduction.
Thank you very much. And welcome to TIBCO, and thank you to ProductTank, and to Kristen, and to Logan. Familiar slide? I'm sure you all know what that means. Okay, well, I've been asked to say a few words about what sparked and continues to drive my study of design and user experience. And really, I attribute much of this to my parents. My mother was a painter and art history lecturer. And my father was a professor and was a pioneer in the study of the human visual system. In fact, if you follow the links from user experience and Wikipedia, inevitably you'll end up at a reference to his work on color and proportion. So thanks to a print of Paul Klee hanging in my house as a child, and his involvement with the Bauhaus art movement, I became interested in industrial design and typography at a very young age. And due to the use of computers in my father's labs, I was exposed to computers as early as 1977. This is a picture of my first computer. My father brought it home for me in 1978. I have it, and it still works. At least I think it does. It displayed a single color, glowing phosphorescent green. It also used cassette tape for storage, had no sound, and no real graphics. 16K of RAM, and a processor far less powerful than the one found in most common car keys. The first program I wrote was a 4 attempt at an Atari arcade game called Missile Command. I wrote it then in assembly language, the arcade computer native language microprocessors. And it wasn't until years later that I used the first computer that demonstrated to me the possibility that I might be able to merge or fuse my interest in design and computing. It was the Apple Lisa, seen here. It was the first commercially available computer that integrated a windowing system, a mouse, high-resolution graphics, and good design in both its hardware and software. It's really from that time onward I kept a focus on user experience and interface aesthetics in general. I understood that I realized the way a user interacted with software was as important, if not more important, than the way it operated internally. Now, a reference to Walter Gropius, another mention of Bauhaus. He was the founder of the Bauhaus School of Design and helped to popularize the expression form follows function, although he is not the creator of that expression. Defining an object's form as a direct expression of its function led to some iconic designs that we're all familiar with, and these were all directly from the Bauhaus School during its heydays in the 20s. However, this doesn't really work for computer software. It hasn't. For form following function often literally yields a form. So let's just quickly consider why UX matters. I'm sure most of you are familiar with these. We have the aesthetic usability effect that states apparent usability is less correlated with the inherent usability compared to the apparent beauty, which says effectively that attractive things are perceived as more useful and more trustworthy. Right? UX directly contributes to startup valuation and product adoption rates. While many VCs now employ designers to select and manage their investments. There's the Designer Fund, for example, which really focuses purely on startups that are founded by designers. By 2020, user experience will overtake price and product as a key brand differentiator. And this really speaks to the overall product experience, not just specifically your interaction with the software. Design-centric companies outperform those that are not. So according to the Design Management Institute's Design Value Index, design-driven companies outperform the S&P 500 by more than 200% and have consistently over the past 10 years. Lovely dashboard, isn't it? So we've really been living in this post-Copernican world, one in which the Earth revolves around the sun, a world in which user experience is no longer dictated by server functions, but a world in which an application's services and architecture are more driven by the needs of this user experience. Despite this, many business applications are still built on the principle that the sun revolves around the Earth, that the user experience is dictated by the function of the server or the backend. So if we take a few basic design principles, such as affordance, the physical property of an object that communicates use, like the handles on the door or a handle on a cup. Grouping, by relating types of information that are grouped together. Ordering implies relevance based on placement or making the most often used features most accessible. Coding, the use of language-neutral schemes like icons and color to convey information. Or learned behaviors, the use of familiar images and actions, like the recycle bin on a desktop. When we apply some of these basic design principles to a data-driven application, we're able to create a user experience that uses BI in context to drive this experience and doesn't present it as a separate component. This prescriptive application approach reduces cognitive load by reducing complexity and focusing the user on the specific actions required to address the issue at hand. In this example, Waggle's learning management system uses Jaspersoft Visualize.js to drive the user experience of their platform with integrated analytic content and visualizations seamlessly. So that's really the end of my introduction. Brief mention of the product, thank you very much. And thank you for allowing me this. I now turn the stage over to Kristen and Logan. Are you ready with your mic?
Well, you tell me. Is it ready?
No.
It's not ready.
I think there's a power switch. It's on? Can you green light? Yeah.
Hello? No, still no. It's probably a user error.
You want this one?
Sure.
You know this one?
Okay. Ooh, it already works. So you and Logan and I chatting for about an hour, and then you guys will get to ask questions. We're pretty informal, so if something really strikes your fancy and you want to ask a question right away, we're happy to do that. It just better be a good question. There we go. Okay.
were telling us we shouldn't be fearless.
What?
You told us we shouldn't fear to.
That's true. So any question, we're open books. I've probably dug myself a little hole. If you weren't here earlier, the people who were here earlier had a no small talk challenge for the initial networking, which maybe we can go and hear the stories after this. So, by way of introduction, there we go. I co-founded Common Sense. Common Sense is a Duke University lab. We have a team in San Francisco, we have a team in Durham, and our goal is to basically go into fintech companies, credit unions, nonprofits, and make small tweaks, nudges, and try to reduce spending, increase savings, increase debt repayment, all the things around financial well-being. And so we've been doing this systematically for now close to 2 years. We have a large group that we've worked with and run experiments with. The second thing I do is run Rational Labs, which is a nonprofit in the behavioral science space, kind of trying to increase financial health and well-being as well. And we work with big companies, kind of the small teams like Internet.org on Facebook, working to apply the behavioral sciences to these teams to help people design their products and their marketing organizations. But before this I've been doing this for over 6 years. Before this, I was a product manager at Quicken, kind of dating myself a little bit. And this is before Intuit bought Mint. So this is basically the Quicken product team and the days when we were in like a to-the-death fight with another product that was similar to ours. And so the product team was freaking out a little bit. This is actually my first exposure to behavioral science, even though I didn't know it. I'll tell you a story. The product team was freaking out a little bit, and the execs come down like execs do and say, we have the answer, we know what you should do. And they told us the answer was to make it look pretty like Mint. So to make a pie chart like Mint, which is beautifully displayed your expenses. So this was not on our roadmap, so we basically kind of stopped what we were doing. And you do what you do is you build this product and you have design, and it was a 3-week, just all-nighter type of a sprint. We finally, at the end of 3 weeks, had the user research set up. It's a glass wall, and we're inviting people in to look at their expenses with our beautiful pie chart, and we're just really excited, right? We're like, we've done something amazing. We can't wait to see the reactions. So we get in the room, and we're like, behind the glass wall, and people sync their bank accounts. This is their real money, and they see their pie chart. And the first person just covers her eyes. And we're like, that's weird. We're sure it's just a fluke. Maybe something's weird, maybe something's wrong. Let's get the next one. And so we did this for about 5 people, and each person had an strongly reversive reaction to our pie chart. And we're just so impressed. We worked so hard on this pie chart. What was wrong? Any ideas? Yeah, this is the essence of loss aversion. What is loss aversion? It's basically seeing all of your money leave you. So loss aversion is the concept of you hate things to lose things more than you like to gain them. It's about 2x is our emotional effect for losing versus gaining. And what we were doing was actually showing people all of their money leaving them. By the way, it's also called information aversion, where you just don't want to step on the scale to see your weight. You don't want to look at your money to see what you have. So crazy, but how was it that a product team didn't think about this before we started building the product? It's just fascinating, right? You have really smart people, engineers, product designers, researchers, execs, thinking about this, and nobody caught loss aversion or information aversion as being something that would drive product engagement and enjoyment. So this is behavioral science, and why we get so passionate about sharing what we do is because we basically bring the insights of behavioral science to product teams so they can inform product development before you have the 3-week sprint and find out from either your user feedback or your engagement that stuff doesn't work. So the goal of today is basically to get all of us to kind of think a little bit differently about the whole product cycle, and implement some of these behavioral science insights, or at least try to, in new ways. And the cool thing, and Logan and I are especially passionate about this, is that it's not around like engineering features usually, it's around small changes. So behavioral science basically suggests it's the details that matter, and so it's just about changing small details in our world. The first conversation I had with Dan Ariely is I was starting at Google, and I was like, we're going to talk strategy. It's going to be a great conversation about the strategy of what we should do. And we literally spent an hour on copy. So behavior change is about the details of life. Okay, so this is our process that we go through. We're going to walk through one by one. I'll give some examples in the way, and then Logan will also share some other examples. It'll be at the end too, so if you want to take pictures at the end, that's cool. Or you can take them now, or like I'll just like. So we identify the key behavior. We do a lit and data review, behavioral diagnosis. We do pre-testing, an A/B experiment, and then we're fully rolling out the product. So 2 things to notice. One, what's not on here is user interviews. That's not a typical part of our process. Not to say we don't ever do them, but we're telling you the things that we normally do in order to get to a product or a feature recommendation or test that we feel really confident in. And we have a lot of steps before we get to a full rollout, which is also different for most product teams. We think we kind of work really hard before it's something that all the customers or all folks will see. Okay, so the first thing is a key behavior. Our team, actually at Google, we created basically trying to simplify the world for everyone, a 3B process. One is identify the key behavior, eliminate barriers, it's just making things easy, and then add some benefits, which is making things like more interesting. So it's not rocket science, but this is kind of simplifies our framework. The key thing I want to talk about today is the first step, which is the key behavior. So the key behavior is the thing that most people get wrong, and it's really interesting because you think about behavior change, you actually have to start with the behavior. Right, you're like, what do you want to figure out the behavior that you want to change in the behavior change process. And so figure out the key behavior, is really sticky for teams. And one of the reasons is, there's a lot of reasons. One of them is, if you were to ask all the people on your team what is the behavior you want to change, and you'd sit them down and interview them, what would they say? They would say something different from each other. So if you can, as a product team, agree on what the key behavior is, and I'm not talking something generic, I'm talking very, very specific, then how is the user going to know what to do? So we spend a lot of time on this step identifying what we call an uncomfortably specific key behavior so that you know what people should be doing. To talk about this a little bit more, I think we're going to do a thought exercise. Imagine you're trying to lose weight. You all look amazing. None of you, I'm sure, are trying to lose weight, but just philosophize that you are. What would you do? What did you say? On diet. On diet, yep.
Envision yourself being slimmer.
Nice. This guy's eating chips, just envisioning himself being slimmer. That's the diet I want to follow. Other? Shout it out.
Get a funhouse mirror.
Funhouse mirror, got it. Exercise. What type of exercise?
Cardio.
Cardio, weightlifting. Other things, you guys are like, it feels like no one's ever tried to do, like I'm the only one who's ever tried to lose weight. What?
Eat less.
Eat less, great. Huh? Pills. I made that up, I don't know if someone said that. What?
Juice cleanse.
Juice cleanse, okay. So you guys are more creative than most of the folks that I asked this question to. Most people have 2 answers. One is eating and one is exercise. Is that right? It's kind of what we've been trained. That's what the magazines and the grocery stores tell us, and this is what we believe. But the problem with this is that countless studies show, and you can Google this, that you can't outrun a bad diet. And by the way, this is like one of these titles that we're finding here, the most catchy titles. Academics just really want us to know that exercise actually does not equate to weight loss. So of all the best available evidence on exercise for weight loss, found that physical activity has led to modest reductions. We need to rebrand this. It's not a weight loss tool. And by the way, I'm not saying exercise is not good for our health and our heart, but it just doesn't correlate with weight loss, right? And yet, most people, if pressed, would say we should exercise in order to lose weight. That's kind of what we've been trained to do. Now, this is fascinating for a lot of reasons. One of them is, this is how many data points that I personally have had in my life for why we should know. And you guys may think of your own data points. Since I was about 21, I've had about 13,000 meals. If I were to work out a couple times a week, not that I have, I've had about 12,000 workouts available to me to figure out what actually works. So each person has had these data points available to us, and yet we're still kind of incorrectly assessing the situation and believing that exercise will lead to weight loss. Now this is crazy, right? That we still as society believe this even though we have this amount of data points. Why is this? So our hypothesis is the system is really noisy. Like, this is a really noisy system. What happens when I eat a salad? Nothing. Nothing happens when I eat a salad. So if I eat well, good for lunch, I don't actually get the feedback. What happens when I work out?
You're tired.
I'm tired, I sweat, my muscles feel good. Actually, I'll come back to that, well, I'll tell you now. I worked out this morning, which is also fascinating. That I know that it doesn't help, but my muscles feel actually amazing right now. So I'm getting feedback in the system that this will help me when we know from a data point that it doesn't. Now, why should you guys care about this? So a lot of you are probably trying to increase engagement, and you're trying to increase active use, and you're trying to change some behavior. And if we can get with this amount of data points something wrong, this is a real problem, right? And this is basically a promotional ad for experiments, saying that we can't really use our intuition about what works. In theory, we have to actually test it and see, does it, is it exercise, is it food, to figure out what's really going on. Because even with this amount of data points, the system is noisy. By the way, this is also a fascinating phenomenon within financial literacy. So basically, you look at America and you ask people questions about their finances, and we're highly illiterate. So and this is not just America, but we have more data on America being financially illiterate. And then you look at financial outcomes, and you're like, financial outcomes aren't good, right? So Common Sense did a study, about a third of people have less than $500 in savings. That's replicated by a lot of other studies that say we just don't have a lot of savings. So you say people don't know about credit scores, they don't know about investing. We have really terrible outcomes. Obviously, what should we do? We should educate people about finances so they get better. So that's kind of the logic leap that we as society has made. $620 billion is spent by the government on financial literacy every year. What actually works? Not education. So John Lynch in Colorado summed up basically 188 studies on financial literacy and found close to zero effect on teaching people something about their finances and it relating to a behavior change effect. Now the people who ran these studies aren't stupid, right? They thought that it was going to work and yet it didn't. And so that's kind of the essence of behavioral science. We have an intuition about something, we want to change a behavior, and we don't actually know what's going on until we run an experiment to figure it out. And the idea with the key behavior is that we get to nail down kind of what behavior we want to change. So if you were just to say, does financial literacy work? We could say, yeah, if your key behavior is increasing financial knowledge. It's not that these classes are bad. People learn how to budget after the class. They just don't go and save money. So if your key behavior is to teach people about money, wonderful. If your key behavior is to change some aspect of their financial life in a different way, terrible outcomes. So that's what we mean about if you articulate the key behavior, you have a shot at basically testing and figuring out what works. Okay, so yeah, focus on, and the key here we find that is helpful for people is when you're talking about a key behavior, focus on the behavior, the salad, not the scale. Right, so the salad, not the weight, because you want to incentivize people doing this, eating well versus the scale, because if you incentivize the scale, we'll start exercising again. By the way, this is also the same for your teams, right? If you just say, I want active use, well, people will probably do the wrong thing. So if you incentivize as a product leader a metric, an outcome, it's possible that you have a lot of noise in the system and not really know it works. Okay, so all the way. So the second thing we do is basically a data and a lit review. So we figured out our key behavior. We figured out what behavior we want to change. Everybody in the team has agreed that this is the uncomfortably specific behavior that we want. And then we remind ourselves that we are like not the first people to have thought about this. Which is a humbling thing, right? Because you say, actually, your product is going to be very innovative. You understand the world so much from all the research you've already done. But the reality is there's a lot of people who've done a lot of research and thinking before you. And so, for example, we worked with Digit. Digit's a fintech app that basically automatically takes some money out of your account to save it away so that you don't overdraft and it matches with your income. It's wonderful. And they asked us to help them with their goal setting feature. And so we could just say, well, this is what we think. But instead, we basically said, actually, we understand some research, but let's do a very comprehensive literature review of all the goal-setting research out there so that we can basically make a more informed decision. Not to say that we wouldn't add to it or copy or replicate it, but let's make decisions in context to stuff that's already out there. And then we also ask for data, and this is what we're pretty good at. As product teams, you say, let's make decisions based on data, but this is like one step in many. It's not the step. Right, so we worked with the personal finance management, and we said we want to actually create some better budgeting 2.0. And so we're looking at the transactions to really deeply understand what people are spending on and over what time. Are they spending on the weekdays or the weekends? So we're asking very in-depth questions about their spend in order to drive a key behavior. And I think this is kind of obvious to most product people, and it just is a small piece of our puzzle that's informed with the whole other kit and caboodle. Is that a kit and caboodle? I hope this is being recorded. Okay, our next step is a behavioral diagnosis. So we do a behavioral diagnosis, and this is basically a map of all the things that somebody's going to do in order to get to the key behavior. So this a little bit replaces our talking to people and asking them about their experience. Instead, we map out the very small steps that people are taking in order to do something or achieve something. We kind of call it like we have a magnifying glass to their life. Like we're a hacker in the way of trying to figure out the small details of what actually is going on until they get to that behavior. So this is what it looks like for us. We usually, for example, if we want to help people get to an outcome, which is save $1,000 in a year, our key behavior is going to be to spend $20 less each week on one thing. Uncomfortably specific, we've set a number, we've set a time frame. We don't want them to spend on 5 things less, we want them to spend on 1 thing. Great, how would somebody do this? So in our process, we say, let's map the flow. Right, let's map the flow of the things they do. It's usually much more detailed than this, but I've simplified. What would you have to do? You'd have to identify the categories that someone can reduce and some things that they want to reduce. You basically have to identify which is the most important one to cut back on. So of all the things they could do, what should they do? They'd have to pick, someone would have to actually pick and commit to doing that. So they'd have to say, this is what I could do, this is what's the most important, now I commit to doing it. And then what would have to happen at the point of temptation or spend, they're at the store, they actually have to not go to the store or not spend. That's like a lot going on in there for somebody to actually have to do. So the app or the product or the feature would have to actually solve this flow, because this is what happens in real life. So then we map like, well, why would it be hard? I know you can't read this, but wait 1 second. Why would it be hard for somebody to do this? And we basically tag the barriers of why it would be hard onto this. So each step is mapped out, and each barrier then aligns with each step. And we say, it's just a prioritization game. Which barrier is the worst? Right? You say, well, how is this most hard for people to do, and where can we help as a product or service? For instance, so one of them was, pick how much you can cut back on, and go back to my middays. This is what their current budget still looks like. How is this difficult? Right, this is really difficult. So the barriers would be, 1, multiple goals. So research tells us that if you have multiple goals versus 1, you're less likely to attain the goals. Great, we just figured out something from research that can kind of already improve this. Opportunity cost, right? Money is just about opportunity cost. And so if one goes up, the other must go down. That's a really complex decision. To understand that, you have to understand your personal utility in life, about how much you value something, how much you value something else, and then figure out what is today's value of that thing versus tomorrow's versus in a year. So this whole trade-off decision is very complex, and obviously then you have a lot of numbers going up there. So that is, so generally if you think about just simple worlds, this is definitely not a simple world. In the flow, you would actually then come to something like spend less in the moment, and what would you realize? How many personal finance apps are out there that help you spend less in the moment? Right, there are very few. There's very few things that actually get you at the point of temptation to do something different. So as a product team, after you've mapped the whole flow, and then you have this map, you can very clearly see, what's being solved and what's not being solved. Sometimes people can do this to their own product, and you just take the full sign-up flow in the product. Sometimes you go externally and say, like, if you're trying to buy a bike, how would somebody do this? Let's map the whole process until they buy a bike. Okay, we did this for Long Game. I'm going to show a quick example of it. Long Game is a fun app. They're basically, thanks to new regulation, you're able to tag a lottery onto savings. So basically it's called prize-linked savings. And so we're all sometimes suckers for a lottery where there's a chance to win a lot of money. This takes, obviously, a lot of consumers' money. How can we make it for good? How can we use our terrible slot machine addiction in order to help us save money? And so what they did is basically create an app. This is an outdated screenshot. They have much better ones now, but and we asked, what's the key behavior? So any ideas on what's the key behavior here?
Saving.
Saving. So save more. and play, yeah. So there are two key behaviors here. So first observation, if we say we want to get uncomfortably specific about a behavior because we're trying to do behavior change and get someone to actually do something different, we'd say, wow, let's talk to the team, but like you have two things going on here. You don't know what the user should do. You should probably figure that out so then the user knows what to do. Because more choice is going to decrease than the likelihood that they take either of these actions. Okay, but let's just say like if they wanted to have saving be the key behavior, what would happen? And you'd say, wow, that's really interesting. What do we know about goals and progress? 0 is a really hard starting point. Like I'm sure I don't have to tell you you've been in a Kickstarter campaign, right? If it's Kickstarter campaigns on 0, you're less likely to donate. This is how the goal gradient theory works, right? Is that actually as you gain things, you're more likely to complete the goal. So if you're starting someone on 0, you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot. It's going to be really hard for someone to do anything. Save more? How much more? Why? Right? Like this is the button, by the way, is a great place to put a value proposition. And right here, it's just directions on what the app wants them to do, but not what the user would want to do or what the key behavior is. Okay, we're going to play this game for, let's just consider that their key behavior is playing the lottery. Like they've got a lot. This is actually, it was kind of very surprising, right? They have a lot going on for them because they're a lottery system, and yet they're not focused on the key benefit of how much you can win. So if we think about behavioral science, there's a lot of key principles. We have loss aversion, social proof. One of them is like time discounting of how we actually are different people today than tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm a wonderful person. Today I may succumb to temptation to take the muffin. This is how we should think about benefits as product teams, is you actually want to appeal to today's self, right? You want to appeal to the person who's making a decision today. The reason you build apps is probably to help people, I'm hoping, is to help people long term, right? But today you have to help them make a decision. So with a lottery, you want to basically focus on the immediate benefit, right? This is technically called hyperbolic discounting, where we actually value things differently over time, but this is a great place to say, I'm talking to today's self, not tomorrow's. And then also, why act now? So again, tomorrow's I'll be a great person. Can you give me a reason that today is a good day to do anything? Deadlines. Wildly underused in kind of a product thing, a lot because we're afraid that people will just then not do it. But what we found is we did a test with Kiva, actually more people with a deadline finish their loan application, right? Because it's very easy to do something later, but if you have a deadline or a reason to do it now, much easier to actually prioritize in your life. I think deadlines are like a gift to people. Okay, how much time do we have? 15. Right. Okay, pre-testing. Pre-testing is something I think probably product teams don't do enough of or at all. I haven't yet really run into a product team that does this and the way that our teams employ it. And what it basically is like, you're about to ask for engineering resources, are you sure? Are you sure the thing you want to do is gonna work? And by the way, how? So you have an idea for a feature or product that's really good, but how actually are you gonna design or develop it? And sometimes we just take the first thing that the designer pumps out and say, this is great, this is wonderful, let's get an internal round of feedback and go for it. And our team would say, actually, we don't know. We have a lot of theories, we have a lot of hypotheses, we run around and let reviews and data, but let's actually continue on and figure out what actually works. So we were launching an intervention with a credit card company and trying to get people to repay their loans. So some things from research. Actually, Katie Milkman did some very nice work on the fresh start effect. The fresh start effect basically says that today I am a new person when it is New Year's. And last year is over. Today is a new day and I'm a new person and I can eat better, anything I want to do is good today with the fresh start effect. And so what our team did was say, how would we apply that to debt repayment? And so her paper had very nice results on New Year's Eve, but it's only New Year's Eve once. How should we actually design this? Does the fresh start work in other days? Let's figure it out. So we ran a study and I basically gave people a lot of options. So you'd give them a scenario and then try to get them to say, how much would you repay on your debt? How much would you save? And asked it a lot of different ways. And then we had 12 different conditions on today is payday. Today is Monday. Today is Monday, May 1st. And so we kind of reframed it. What this survey does, it doesn't give us absolute values. What it does is give us a relative interest across the conditions of actually what our intuition, we're basically building intuition. And what we found was that actually Monday, so New Year's killed it, right? New Year's is gonna always kill it. It's just the day to do things. If you want to get people to rethink things, New Year's is an underused holiday. Monday really showed up well. Our hypothesis as a team, though, was that Monday, May 1st would work. We're like, this is amazing. We've got Monday and we've got May 1st coming up. We just doubled down. And what happened is actually that didn't work as well as Monday. So even though we ended up launching this on Monday, May 1st, we didn't even talk about May 1st. We just talked about Monday. So again, this is not revolutionary, but it's really talking about the details of life to say, actually, we don't know. Let's take a hypothesis, do some pre-testing, and launch it. And this is just copy, right? But it's really worth our time if we're going to invest in a full feature. Okay, second example on pre-testing, we're with a company called Payable. Payable's a really nice company that actually they just got acquired by Stripe. A really nice company that helps contractors or 1099 people get paid. So they send money very quickly. And the problem with actually being a 1099 worker is what? Taxes, exactly. And so it's such a pain if you're a 1099 worker because you owe the government a lot of money at the end of the year. And so we surveyed people when we first started working with them and found out, yes, obviously, people aren't paying quarterly taxes like they should be, so people who should be only 16% were, and 47 of them said they wanted some help with automated tax savings. 47% is a lot. If we think about kind of a relative survey, so we're like, this is great. We have to go ahead to release an automated tax fund, let's do it. But our team was like, well, we're still back to this age-old question of like, we know what we want to do, but we should pre-test and figure out how we actually do it. So we didn't solve our problem by just knowing that the feature was good, we still had to figure this out. So we did a survey and basically asked, like, what is going to be the biggest barrier to signing up for a tax fund? And we asked it a lot of different ways, and this is just one summary slide, but this one was significant. I want my money to be more accessible. So they wouldn't sign up because they wanted more access to their money. We had to prioritize different features. This one consistently showed up, and so now our team is a little stuck, right? Because in one hand, the contractors are like, I want an automatic tax fund. I want an automatic tax fund. On the other hand, they just answered our survey and said, like, I want my money. Like, don't take my money. I don't want you to have my money. And so we have this really interesting dilemma that we didn't know we had when we were first starting because of the survey. And so we said, let's not just like, because in one world you could say that's great data that the survey gave us, and as a product team, what should you do? You should build features to give people control. They want high access to their money, and we should take this and build features, right? And then you create a couple features that would increase the control, and we're like, not yet. We don't really know. This is just an intuition that people have. Let's actually try to fake launch the tax fund with these different features and see what happens. It wasn't really a fake launch because of what they were really going to launch it. And so we did what we do next, which is an A/B experiment. So this one was pretty low cost. It was within email. And what we did is basically say, let's frame an email. By the way, the open rates on their emails, because they're getting paid, are over 80%. They shared this information. So it's public, but their open rates were very high. And so we said, let's just put the promo in there, and this time focus on approved transfers, withdraw anytime. Right, so this is the control version. This is like highly accessible money. You get to control what happens, don't worry about it. But we still wanted to make it a little bit automatic because we wanted to focus on what they actually would do, but add a feature, just like you would if you're launching. And then the second one, obviously very small changes, but enough. We said, you know what? Automatically save the right amount, no mention of control. By the way, we did, and this is a really good survey tip, is we had start in 2 months, not interested. Why? Because we actually don't know if when you say not interested, if you just mean not interested today. You may be interested, but maybe today's a bad day, and maybe you owe a lot of money, like we don't know. And so when you're doing a survey like this, you actually want to get the most data points about someone's intentions versus what they think they're going to do, or what you think not interested means. Okay, any guesses? This is exciting. Huh? No guesses. This one.
Yes.
This one. Yes. Okay. You're wrong. Just kidding. Thank you for speaking up. So we had more people. So more people said, I didn't even label these graphs, but have to trust me. This is the automated one. So more people opted into the automated one. It was 15% versus 12% if we combined interested in 2 months. And overall, so A, awesome, 13% of people were interested in this and clicked through and then filled out our sign-up form. So A, that's just great data. B, we know now the team doesn't actually have to build all these features because it's not going to hurt them if they don't have these control features. Now, it's not to say that they can't build them later or that actually when people are really forced and they see the first time that their money's coming out that something's not going to happen. But our intuition, if we just looked at what people said or one result instead of continuing in pretest, would have probably been incorrect, or at least for the first drive. Okay, I'm going to give another example of A/B testing here. So we worked with a company called CoinFlip. CoinFlip is a fun company that basically, if you have a coupon from, like, let's say ARP gives a lot of coupons, or AAA gives a lot of coupons, and then you also have a Kroger card, you have to bring the coupon from ARP into the Kroger and then tell them. And in our technology world, this seems very silly. Shouldn't Kroger know that you're an ARP member and just take it off your bill? So this is the vision for CoinFlip. It's actually very difficult, obviously, but they did it. And so now if I'm an ARP member, I swipe my Kroger card and magic happens. They know the discount is taken off. Very difficult for people to actually sign up and know this. So this is kind of incredible in the way of saying there are discounts out there. People need to get, people who are living on the line, actually these discounts are quite incredible. And most people are using coupons. Again, it's fairly difficult. So our challenge was basically how do we increase the likelihood that somebody will take CoinFlip up on this and sign up for the product. So we use what we have is the endowment, or sorry, loss aversion. So we talked about this a little bit with Quicken, but it's basically this idea that if you don't, or sorry, I'll explain it with endowment since it's a mug. But if I were to have a mug and you were to have a mug, and I would ask you how much you would want to buy my mug for, I would say I would sell it for you for 2x more than you would say you would buy it. So I value the things that I own much more than somebody else does. The biggest effect of this is children. We value our children more if you own them than if other people do. This is beside the point from a product perspective. But, so the cool thing that CoinFlip had going for them was that actually people were already AAA customers and they were already Kroger customers. So like, this wasn't a sign up experiment. This was just like, take advantage of the stuff that you have. And so we use this idea that you already own something in order to actually influence the design of the email. So, and by the product implications for this are big, right? Because it's how AARP, it's how AAA would talk to their members and say, this is already a benefit that you have. The whole product flow would change if it wasn't something new versus something just you already own. So these are the 3. We actually did a few more conditions. They don't put on slides as well. But 2, 1 is, we should answer. No? Okay. Sign up today and claim today. Very, very small changes, right? I'm going to sign up for something or I'm going to claim it. It's already yours. We have some small text there. And then the last one here was basically saying, you know, we have the subject line, get discounts up there, and then let's actually just be more concrete and specific and say get 20% off. Maybe that will be better. We tried a couple of variations with dollars as well. Any guesses on what worked?
Middle.
Yeah, I mean, I teed it up, so this time you guys are correct. The middle one worked. I did tee it up with a story. So the endowment basically increased not only the open rates, but the click rates as well. So it opened up the funnel, and then people were more likely to open it, more likely to click. Now the other finding that we have that I think is probably more helpful for CoinFlip than this one is what happened to percent, which was 20%, versus these 2, which is discount. It was statistically less for both. This is surprising. So why would it be that it was statistically less? So we actually don't know, but we do know that something around like, you know, the idea of kind of the halo effect, we just believe the discount's going to be there. And so if you like something, you're just going to go for it and continue going. So people may actually not like the concrete and specific aspect of what's going on, and instead they want to believe that the discount is actually greater than it is. So again, complete strategy changing for coin flip, because really our hypothesis and theirs was like, let's show really high discounts and show them tangibly, concrete specific, so that people will opt in. And the reality is that actually didn't play out in the open and click rates or in the funnel. Okay, I think here we go. So kind of as a summary, our behavioral process takes a long time. But we actually are fairly confident that results in much more effective behavior change strategies than what we've seen current product teams go through. I think, if you reflect on your own team and you ask, like, do designers read lit reviews? Do marketers read lit reviews? Do product people, engineers read lit reviews? No. You're like leaving a ton on the table, right? Because you're basically leaving all the research, the treasure trove of research that's already been done before you to inform our insights. And then when we say we're actually just gonna like build something, talk to 5 people and launch it, we're also really trusting 5 humans, like 5 user interviews, instead of doing more quantitative review of actually understanding what our hypothesis is to get people to the key behavior that we're testing for. This does take a little bit of creativity. It's not easy, right? The idea of basically identifying key behavior, but what it is actually cheap, because it's not building a feature. So we tell people that this is like de-risk the whole flow, because we're actually much more confident it's going to change the behavior that you set out to change. On that note, Logan's going to give probably more fun examples than I just gave, and here we go.
Okay, how's my mic? Do you guys need a little stretch or anything? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and walk you through behavioral economics in action, but it really relaxes me if you ask questions, so feel free to raise your hand throughout or yell out things. I would love to make this more conversational, even though we're over 100 people. So as Jeff said, I am Logan, and I work at Airbnb as a user experience researcher, and previously I worked with Kristen at Google, working in the Irrational Lab, the behavioral economics lab at Google. So what that meant was that Google realized that there was all this academic research out there that explained how people think. And behavioral economics is really just that. It's how and why people make decisions. So Google said, there's all this stuff in academia, how can we bring it to our products and our product marketing? And what we would do is similar to the lit review that Kristen mentioned. We would say, oh, well, in academia, they found that if you have an identity, you're more likely to follow through on something. So if I say, are you a voter? You're more likely to actually go vote than if I say, are you planning on voting tomorrow? And how we would apply that to Google is to say, oh, during the sign-up flow, we should probably get people to have an identity. Maybe we should add an avatar. So what you'll see today are 3 examples of when we actually took these principles of behavioral economics and applied them either to products at Google or products at Airbnb, and how those worked. And the main idea I want you to walk away with is the idea that people are irrational. They do irrational things, but in predictable ways, hence Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational. And if you can actually harness those ideas of how the ways in which people are predictably irrational, you can design products that work well for you and get users to do the intended behavior. So when Kristen and I were at Google, the AdWords team came to us and they said, how can we lower new advertiser churn for Google AdWords? So it's probably not surprising that most of Google's revenue comes from AdWords. And what they were finding was that although many, many people sign up for AdWords, a lot of them were quitting within the first few weeks. So we took a look at this and we said, okay, what can we do? Can we create incentives around this? Can we create discounts? Can we create communities for people to join together? We thought about all these different options, and what we came up with was the fact that many people were leaving AdWords quickly because of their expectations. They thought, I'm gonna join, I'm gonna spend thousands of dollars, I better make money right away. And that's not really how AdWords works. So raise your hand if you've ever used AdWords before. Yeah, so a lot of people have used AdWords. It takes time, both time for you to learn how it works and also time for the algorithm to learn how you and your customers work. So there was mismatched expectations where people thought they were going to get immediate results and they didn't. So what did? We took this idea that people had false expectations or the wrong mindset around it. And we came up with this idea called the AdWords 3-month access program. And we worked with a call center, and we told the people at the call center, when somebody comes up and signs up for AdWords, on the phone, we want you to say 3 months as many times as possible. And we want you to tell them that they're now part of the My AdWords 3-month expert access program. And we designed materials such as the one that you can see here, which show that AdWords is a tree, and you start as a seed, and you water it, and it takes time. And after 3 months, you get this lovely tree. And as you can imagine, this didn't really cost any money. This is telling somebody at a call center to say the word 3 months, and it's designing a picture of something growing from a seed to a tree. But what we found is that by creating this program called My AdWords 3-month access program, we were able to increase retention, so people staying with AdWords by 13%, and actually each rep was able to increase their activations by 18%. So in Google scale, this is obviously a lot of money, and why we were so excited about this is because we weren't really spending money or creating new features, we were just understanding that people's expectations were that something was going to be quick and easy. And by shifting their expectations to the fact that it would take 3 months to find success, we found that we were able to shift that. And the main takeaway here is that, as Kristen mentioned, oftentimes if you speak to a group of people about key behavior, they will have different ideas. So what we changed Google's mindset on here is that the key behavior wasn't just getting people to sign up, it was getting people to stay. And our intervention was how to get people to stay is to shift their mindset from short-term to long-term. So now I want to ask you this. How might your company identify the correct user behavior? So does anyone have an example where they feel like their company is aiming for maybe growth when they should be aiming for going deeper? Anything like that? We can work through a problem together.
I think all other things are perfect.
Yeah. Any ideas for this? Should I start calling on people?
I'll throw it out.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I work at Realtor.com, and one of our goals is to build website traffic to get more people to come search for their dream homes. But we only monetize when people actually fill out the lead form. And so trying to balance between growing our website traffic and generating and driving people down the funnel to leave a lead. That's kind of the core business model. And so, hopefully you can work with that.
Well, it's interesting because it sounds like if you're all familiar with incentive programs, people do what you measure and people act toward the thing that you incentivize. So it sounds like even within your company, you're putting a lot of effort towards getting people to fill out this lead. But what you really care about is sending the maximum amount of traffic. So it sounds like perhaps you could change even internally the user behavior to how do we increase traffic, not just leads, because that's also something that matters. So you need to create an incentive structure that actually honors not just leads, but traffic in general. Does that sound right? Does anyone else have any suggestions for him? Okay, well, what's your name?
I'm Forrest.
Okay, well, if anyone wants to find Forrest afterwards and give him any suggestions for Realtor.com, I think that would be a great use of this meetup. Okay, I'm gonna keep going, but I would love to hear your examples. I think it's really fun to work through this stuff and just to see how having a different perspective by even groups of people, not just me, can really help you. So once again, the AdWords team came to Kristen and to me and they said, how can we get more people to set up their AdWords account with an expert on the phone? So it might seem obvious, but people, when they sign up for AdWords by themselves, they don't do as good of a job as when they speak to someone on the phone. But as I'm sure you've seen, increasingly people don't like to speak on the phone. That's why those ads for companies like Delivery.com are like, you can order pizza without speaking to a human. So similar to that, Google found that while accounts performed much better when they were signed up by somebody with an expert on the phone, a lot of people didn't want to do this.
AGMs take over from live television, same reason.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff where people, not only is it seen as an aspect of the product, but it's seen as like the entire marketing campaign is don't have to speak to a human. So with that in mind, we had a difficult problem because we said, how can we actually get people to shift the comfortable behavior of not speaking to somebody and actually get people to call in? So before we get into that story, I want to tell you a little story about a man named Tony Little. Does anyone recognize this? Okay, good. Side note, Kristen and I looked this up yesterday. It's available on eBay for $119. For those of you who don't know what this is a fitness product from the 80s called the Gazelle. And this is the man who invented it, and his name is Tony Little. This is a great, very 80s picture. So Tony Gazelle was a big deal in the infomercial QVC scene of the 1980s. And like many of the infomercials of that time, at the end of his pitch, he would say, "Operators are standing by, please call now." So when you hear this, you probably get a little picture in your head. I know that I do. Here's what that picture in my head looks like, right? There's people, they're waiting by the phone, they're waiting for your call. If you call, it might be awkward. So Tony Little went to a consultant, and her name is Colleen Zott. And she was what I call an infomercial whisperer. She was really able to move products in innovative new ways. And when she worked with Tony Little and the Gazelle, she came up with a line which should now be very familiar to all of you. If operators are busy, please call again. I'm sure we've all heard this before. So think about the two lines. The first one is, call now, operators are standing by. The second one, if operators are busy, please call again. With this second line, what picture do you imagine? Probably something more like this. A really busy phone room with lots of people picking up. You have to call again and again to get through. And what they found was it was actually immensely successful. This got tons of people to call in. The Gazelle made millions of dollars, and it was one of the most successful infomercial products of all time. And the reason for this is something called social proof. So as this picture says, when people are free to do as they please, they usually imitate each other. And that's exactly what happened with the Gazelle. When you imagine operators are standing by, you just imagine a bunch of people who could take your phone call. But if operators are so busy that you have to keep trying, it suggests that tons of people around the world who are at home at 3 a.m. on their couch are calling in. They all want the Gazelle. And this is the idea of implicit social proof. Although they didn't say, most people are doing this is good behavior, you understand that, wow, if the lines are busy, lots of people must be calling in. And social proof is one of the easiest rules or principles of behavioral economics to apply. And it can be in something like saying, oh, we want people to save more. So saying like 80% of people who have a 401k opt into automatic increases in investments each year. And that's explicit social proof. And what this is with Tony Little is implicit social proof. You can see that most people are doing it, therefore it's suggested that it's a good idea. Do you have a question?
Well, another example, the nudge unit, right? You're part of the small minority in your area that have not yet paid your taxes.
Yes, perfect example. So that is one of my favorite examples of social proof. Have you heard of the social proof example with O-Power? So O-Power wanted people to use less energy each month. So they tried this thing where they would send you something and they would rate how your energy usage was compared to your neighbors. So what they found was if they said, you're using a lot more energy than your neighbors, people would lower it. But what do you think happened when you were using a lot less energy than your neighbors? It went up, exactly. And that's an idea called negative social proof. You don't want to tell people that most people are doing the wrong thing or they'll shift to that direction. So what O-Power actually ended up doing was they said, if you're using more energy than your neighbors, we'll tell you. And if you're using less energy than your neighbors, then we'll just give you a smiley face. So that ended up working out really well. So social proof is something that you can use really easily. What you can do is figure out what the key user behavior is that you want people to do, and then find a statistic, a real statistic, that shows that many people are using that behavior, doing that behavior, and then bring that to the attention of your users. And the more specific you can get, the better. So if you want Ireland, people in Ireland who are AdWords advertisers to adopt a certain feature, you might want to say, small business owners like you in Dublin are all doing this. And the closer people feel to the group, the more likely they are to adopt it. Any questions? Go ahead.
Will you use this technique to move people to use, for example, a very important feature in the product that they don't always want to use it? So if you have a feature that is a very sticky feature, a very useful feature, if you want people to nudge people to try to use it, would you use something like, most people or most businesses are using this?
Yeah, so if you figure out, okay, we want most people to adopt a certain feature, and actually a lot of people are doing it, you can bring that to the attention of other customers by saying, most successful advertisers are adopting this feature, therefore you should. And what I did there was I added in the word successful. So even if most people aren't doing it, but the people who are doing well are doing it, then you can bring that to people's attention and they'll say, oh, well, I want to be similar to the successful group, so I will do it. But the key idea here is people want to do what the majority is doing. We do want to keep these social norms there, and if you can bring that to your users' attention, it tends to shape behavior. Any other questions? So now we'll go back to the Google example. So knowing this idea of social proof, what did we do? Well, here's the control email. So this is what Google was sending before. It was an email that said you can get free advice from our AdWords experts, so it's offering a benefit, and it gave a phone number with a picture of the phone. So what this is basically saying is, oh, okay, this is an option that I have. This is something that I could do. Using the idea of social proof, here's what we came up with. So this is an email that was sent out as a test, and it does use social proof. Can anyone tell me what the social proof is?
Time slots that are taken.
Yeah, time slots that are taken, exactly. So it's social proof because it's suggesting that other people are doing this. There's a limited number of spots and other people are booking them. Therefore, advertisers are doing this. It's a good behavior. It's a common behavior, and it suggests that you too should do it. Do you have a question? Oh, maybe I planted you in the audience. Yes, so this actually, for extra credit, has several principles of behavioral economics. The first one that I really want to emphasize is social proof. It suggests that other advertisers are using these time slots and you should book one. Another one is, are you familiar with the concept of paradox of choice?
Yes.
I see some heads raising, so head nodding. So if you give people too many choices, they often get overwhelmed and they make no choice at all. But if you give people a limited number of choices, they feel like they can actually assess what's out there and choose the right one. So we made it easier for people. We said there's 3 days, 4 time slots per day, and we gave them a limited choice, which helps avoid this paradox of choice.
So, did you ever purposefully insert used spots, even though that spot was really free, in order to give the impression of scarcity? So like randomly insert used
It's a good question. So obviously this went to a lot of people because there are lots of Google advertisers. We did try to keep it honest. Kristen and I would love to do an entire session with you called Ethics of Behavioral Economics. Yes, we should do that next time. Jeff, take notes. So in general, we tried to find times that actually had been booked, although there were more than one rep available at each time, depending on the time zone. So this represented reality, but there were situations where like that spot was bookable and we presented it as not because there was more than one rep. Did you have a question?
It was the same, but I was rephrasing it. Isn't that lying?
Okay, so tune in next week for ethics. And so I explained the concept of paradox of choice. So there was limited choice, and then finally the idea of scarcity. So things seem more valuable when there isn't as a scarce amount of them, and this felt more valuable because you said, wow, there's only a certain number per day per hour, and I really want to get one of those. It's a scarce resource.
When does it fall off? When is too scarce a problem? In other words, there's only one stock left. When does that stop the behavior? that you're trying to get?
That's a great question. So that's the type of thing that we didn't experiment on, but that would be a great next experiment. So maybe we would send the next one and say, okay, there's 4 days with the same number of slots. Okay, there's 2 days with the same number of slots. And if we had kind of infinite experimental resources, we would want to distill that. We have done that level of minutia testing with subject lines. So we wanted to know what was the right amount of time to tell somebody that a survey would take. What was the right amount? Was it 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes? We actually did run that test just to get the exact number of minutes that we would tell people that an action would take that would make them go and take that action right away.
What about when you have different quote-unquote irrational triggers, but they're in conflict with each other? So for example, in supermarkets, I don't know if it's still true, but I think at one point we kind of realized that a perception of bountifulness really inspired people to shop more. So for example, you go into a supermarket, that's why you see piles of oranges or piles of apples, right? Just line up nice and neatly. And it's to give you a sense of bountifulness of all these fruits and vegetables. And they say, well, you know, that they notice that inspires people to buy more, but at the same time, that conflicts with the other principle that the paradox of choice, right? Maybe too much options kind of stifles people's decision-making process. So those are kind of two different conflicting triggering behaviors.
Yeah.
How do you balance them when you try to develop features?
I think that's a great question, and my short answer would be to experiment. So what you're really talking about is saying, like, does my desire for this trump my limitation around this? For the example that you gave, I can respond by talking about the famous jam study. So they wanted to see what was the best way to get somebody to buy jam. So in one scenario, they had a team go to a pretty fancy gourmet grocery store, and they had 24 jams. And they saw how many people approached, how many jams did each person try, and how many people bought jams. They did the same study, but with only 6 jams. Does anyone who hasn't heard of this before have any idea what happened?
The small one is going to win, because I don't know if I'm going to choose the right one out of 24. But even I think why 6, I think even 2 is going to be more successful, or like Costco, even just 1.
Yeah, so that is right, but one thing I want to note is that more people approach with the 24 jams. So if you actually were to look at the results, a higher number of people approach with the 24 jams. You try a larger number of jams, but you're much, much more likely to buy with only 6 jams. I think the difference is between 3% of people and 60% of people buy when it's fewer number of jams. So what's important about the study and why it's relevant to what you said is the 24 jams is the bountiful oranges, and it gets people to approach. But the 6 is I'm confident that I'm choosing the right one, and that gets people to buy.
Would that be a kind of a difference between trying to optimize for getting product exposure, that is, you get 24, more people walk in, so they're more attracted to walk in the store and check things out, versus trying to optimize your process for actually checkout rate? Right? Yeah,
I think that's exactly what it is. And that almost goes back to what Forrest said. So it's like the oranges get the most number of web traffic, but the smaller number gets the most number of leads. And you have to figure out which are you truly optimizing for. And at different stages of the product life cycle, you may be going for approach, or you may be going for the buying the jams.
But isn't it a question of availability? I think 24 suggests that your choices are actually going to be limited. So, you know, you want to go to a brewery that has lots of choice of beer so that you can find the right one. Making the choice, obviously, you know, you make it from a limited set. But I think the approach is where things are more available than less.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychological principles at play. So if there's 24 jams, I might say, wow, what an amazing jam company. They've really explored all these flavors. They seem to know there's so many types of fruits I've never heard of. But in terms of like what actually gets you to make a purchase decision, it's often confidence. I confidently know that I'm buying the right thing. And it takes that limited number for you to say, I understand what's available and I'm buying the right thing. So there's different principles at play. One makes you look like you have a lot of different options, and one makes you feel like I know the right thing to do. And that's something that I tell product managers all the time. more options is not always better, because if I have too many options and I feel unconfident about the right one, I just won't make any choice at all. And that's when you get people abandoning their shopping carts, abandoning sign-up flow. They just feel like, I'll never know the right way to set this up. So they give up.
So going from abundance to scarce, would you recommend if you have an abundance of something, then you break it up into smaller bits to determine which one's the most important?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think breaking up it into smaller bits makes it less overwhelming. I also feel like paternalism in product design is a great thing. So you should know what's best for your users. You shouldn't say, here's 50 different ways that you can design your website. Let's say you were Squarespace, and then they have to go through each one and say, is this the right one? Is that the right one? You should say something like, are you trying to sell a product? Okay, here are the 3 Squarespace designs for your product. Because that confidence that you should have when you express that to your users, they say, wow, it's easy for me to evaluate 3, I'm choosing the right one. With 50, they're just like, this is too many, I'll never choose the right one. Does that make sense?
I just want to answer this question about lying or right. So right now we're talking about the human behavior and how they interact. You cannot actually assess human behavior. You have to use right kind of wordings. So it's not technically lying, you're testing a process and giving the product that you want to send to them, rather than thinking it's lying, because you will not progress so far if you don't know how to actually communicate. And behavior science is obviously communicating in a way where people or a group of people interact and understand the product or any domain that you're working with. Right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's all part of the experimental process, and in general, you should have your customers and users' best interests and health at heart.
I have a question about this entire experimentation process, actually, and especially applicable to people who design features for products. How much time and energy and money should one allocate for implementation versus development?
I think that's a pretty individual question, depending on what resources you have, how well you know your customers, how long you've been in business. But what I like about what Kristen shared is that you kind of think of those as quick and dirty experimentation, because it's pretty inexpensive to create 2 different emails and test them, and then use that as a form of experimentation to then build a product. So for a lot of you who are product managers, my main takeaway around that would be use experimentation in the beginning before you have to invest the really expensive resources like designers and engineers and product managers' time and marketing's time, and use things like email and website A/B testing to figure out what's going to resonate and cause your users to take the ideal behavior. Okay, I'm going to move on. And one other thing that worked out really well from that Google test is the idea of reminders. So calendars are actually one of the least utilized aspects of behavior change and nudging. So there's a woman named Ariely, and she did a very simple experiment in which she wanted to see if she could get people to show up to their doctor's appointments more. And so she would send out reminders, and by using reminders and actually specific calendar reminders, she was able to get people to show up to their doctor's appointments 3 times as often. So with this Google experiment, when somebody would select one of the times, even though we didn't have a booking system to book time with an exact person, it added a calendar reminder that would say, I'm going to call Google AdWords at this time. It included the phone number, so it reduced friction, and then it actually suggested some things that you might talk to your rep about. And this is something that everybody could really use, is if you want users to take specific behavior, putting calendar reminders on for specific things is a great technique. And what we found was by that combination of scarcity, limited choice, social proof, and reminders, we were able to get 12% more calls in, which once again, within Google scale is really valuable because it's 12% more people who are getting an AdWords account set up by an expert. They're much more likely to be successful. So these are all techniques that you can utilize. Sorry, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry, you offered something really quickly there. I maybe I misinterpreted. Did you say so you were booking these calls, but you didn't actually have a system, so you were putting reminders where it was just like call into a random pool? operators as opposed to, or was this separate and distinct?
They were able to book, like the reps were getting it, but it was just something where like we could have waited for the feature to be perfect so that both people got a reminder and you understood who you were talking to, but rather than waiting what could potentially have been months or even years for the feature to work perfectly, we said, what's a roundabout way that we can still get this person to put it on their calendar? And for us, it was just working with the Google Calendar team, getting a small link, putting that into the system, and that when you clicked on that link, it added something to your calendar. So, we figured out what are the 3 main calendars that most people use, and we were able to take this learning about the power of reminders and use it to get people to follow through on the action.
But when they called in, they still just called a generic number and someone on the back end had to figure out which operators.
I don't remember the exact details, and I think it might have varied depending on the region, but the point was that the calendar reminder is a really powerful nudge for getting people to follow through on the action.
Was there any effort to get people to talk to experts via other means besides the phone? Like, for example, using Slack or using GChat or other types?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there are lots of other things that we could have done, and we in fact did later do testing that said, how can we shift behavior from phone to chat? How can we shift behavior from chat to email? And there are lots of ways that you can do it, and a lot of it is kind of similar to my overall point of this talk, which is like you can take these ideas of people are motivated by social proof, people are motivated by goals, people are motivated by things being clear, and once you understand those principles, you can design something to reflect that. So I'll give one quick example. If you wanted more people to use chat, you could put the word recommended next to chat, and more people use chat, because that's a form of social proof.
Just quick recap, 4 were reminders, scarcity, social proof, and one more?
Limited choice.
Limited choice.
Yeah, and so.
Isn't that scarcity?
Scarcity is more like things seem valuable if there's not a lot of it, and limited choice is people feel overwhelmed by too many choices. Was there another question?
Do you measure any other metrics as part of this test, like call conversion rate, or like influenced lifetime revenue from these customers?
Yeah, so there were more metrics that we measured, and as Kristen and I worked at Google over time, we got better and better about figuring out what those metrics would be. These are the ones I'm allowed to share publicly, but I would, kind of the cards I'm not revealing are yes, we were definitely measuring things like people who spoke to experts, were their accounts still better set up, what was the retention, what was the amount that was earned. There was lots of other metrics going on in the background, and different teams had different priorities, and each team was kind of counting on us to make sure that those metrics were being respected.
How do you know that you're using the metrics effectively? Like, let's say you're trying to sell a product, but nobody knows about the product. How do you reach out to a lot of people and then use those metrics to get them to actually buy the product? Because I feel like if you say that there's some sort of scarcity, or you try to use those metrics without there being a lot of knowledge about a non-existing product, you won't happen to get any sort of conversion rate because there's no reason to buy at that point.
Yeah, if I understand your question correctly, I think the point is like, what's the right metric at a different point in time in the life cycle?
Yeah.
And I think that's just really comes down to product managers, teams, executive, everybody being on the same page. So if you're launching a product for the first time, then your metrics should be around awareness and driving traffic, and maybe conversion metrics will come later. So you're still kind of in an early stage of figuring out what's going on. So I don't have a kind of perfect behavioral economics answer for that, but I basically say like people should be really clear about what your goals are as a company at different stages and have metrics that reflect what success is for that stage.
When you were trying to get people to call in to speak to a rep,
Yeah.
how did you know what kind of people you were trying to get to call in? Some probably have an aversion to talking to people because it's a waste of time. Some probably want to talk to people because they think they can get more effectiveness. So how did you break down the type of people you wanted before you said, hey, I decide on this type of strategy for the different segments or cohorts?
So from what I can recall, we knew that in mass, the majority of people benefited from calling in, people who were smaller advertisers, people who were larger advertisers. So we thought, like, why not get as many people as possible to call in, and then people will self-select. So there's people who really hate speaking on the phone. I doubt that the kind of A/B test I showed you got them to call in, but the people in the middle who were able to be nudged, this worked for them. So I think that's something that can be applied to a lot of companies. Like there's going to be people that already call in to the intended behavior, people that will never call in, they're just not the right fit for the user behavior, but what is an intervention in the middle that gets that middle group to then take a behavior that they were a little more hesitant about. Okay. So I just want to show one more example of social proof. So Robinhood is a financial services company that's actually based here in Palo Alto. And one thing that they did that was really clever, this was from a few years ago, you had to be invited to join Robinhood. And as you can see, the call to action here is claim your invite. And what they said at the bottom of this email is, you have to accept this invite within 72 hours. So to Kristen's point, this uses a deadline. And if not, you will be moved to the end of the wait list with over 500,000 people. Wow. So not only does this make you want to take the action right away, which if you do something now, you're much more likely than if you say, I'll do it later, and then you forget. But it says 500,000 people are waiting to do this thing. It's showing you this implicit social proof. Clearly, this is a desirable thing, and it makes you want to be a part of it. So finally, I'm going to finish with this third example, which is how could you use social proof to demonstrate the value of a popular Airbnb? Any ideas?
Reviews.
Reviews, right. So is it good reviews? Is it number of reviews?
Quality especially.
Quality. What else?
The type of customer you want to stay at your Airbnb, market with that.
How would you do that?
Picture.
Oh, pictures of the type of people you want staying there. Staying at your Airbnb.
So like if it was a business, if you want to get business travelers, you might show like somebody using a laptop.
Right.
Yeah. So do you have an idea?
I've seen a few check marks next to really popular hosts on Airbnb as
Yeah.
kind of verify certain statistics.
Yeah, so that's, Airbnb has something called Superhost. It's a sign of somebody who's had certain number of people stayed there and a certain level of reviews. And that's a great form of social proof where you're sort of saying, okay, this person has been vetted and they're kind of experts at hosting. Any other ideas?
The number of people who view this post,
Sorry.
people who view the listing, like number of people who like saw this listing.
Yeah, so number of people who have viewed this listing, that's great. What were you going to say?
The minimum length of stay.
And why is that social proof?
Because, the choice is limited. If you're not staying for at least 3 days, then you can get that properly.
So I do think that works more for the idea of limited choice than social proof, but yeah, that's a great idea. It's saying like, we're only gonna show this to people who are really serious about staying for a certain number of time. Any other, go ahead.
When you say, for instance, that the listing is only available 3% of the time, you are very lucky that currently you can use it.
Yeah, that's great. So saying it's only available a certain number of time and you're very lucky. So now I'm gonna show you what Airbnb actually has done to use social proof. So the first example is showing you that, so I think somebody mentioned this home is on people's minds. So this says, this home has been viewed 500 times in the past week. So what this does is it's social proof. It's showing you lots of people like this, lots of people are interested in it, but it also makes you want to book it right away. Because if you're competing with 500 other people out there who are all looking at the same home, it doesn't really make you want to say, okay, I'll wait a few days, I'll talk to my friends, I'll compare it. I say, wow, if I want this, I have to book it now. So this is a great example of how social proof can get users to take immediate behavior.
Could the 500 times that they viewed it, but it hasn't been booked, also have like a negative connotation? Like, why did people view it but not book it?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about that before. That is possible. What I would say is this did run as an experiment and was found to be successful, but that's what your point is exactly why things should be experimented with, because sometimes you'll have a hypothesis, you'll test it, and the exact opposite thing will happen. I run experiments where something that worked super well in France had reverse effects in Germany. And that's oftentimes because cultures are different and maybe somebody was hypersensitive to privacy versus another group was sensitive to personalization. So that's why you use these behavioral economics tools to improve your product, but you should always experiment because they don't always turn out the way you expect.
The label on the button is interesting. It doesn't say book, it says request to book. You have to ask, and maybe we'll let you book.
Yeah.
So there's no blessing.
Look at this, you'll never see the world in the same way again. All copy is there to get you to think about things differently. And I have one more example of how Airbnb use social proof, which is similar to what you said in the back. There's a concept called the rare find, where they say, wow, this place is usually booked, this is really popular, and on the dates that you're talking about, it's free, and it makes you feel like, oh, I have good taste, I chose this one that's usually booked, I'm so lucky, this worked out so well, and it makes you want to book it right away. And I personally know when I see the rare find, it really encourages me to choose that Airbnb. So that's another example of implicit social proof. Did you have a question?
Yes, do you show them every Airbnb that I'm trying?
No, these are all like for real things. So the 500 number is based on real people viewing it. If everyone said rare find, I think pretty simply you'd be like, is it a rare find? Is it everyone is a rare find? So I want to kind of underline that point is you have certain behaviors that you want people to take, you have certain behaviors that your users already have taken. How can you take what's out there and market it and kind of put it together in a way to take the strengths that you already have and tell people, like, most people are doing this, you should do this too.
So you got actually two things up there. Why would you have two items, like the rare find and these, 4,000 travelers saved this place?
Those are actually different. Those are different homes.
They're different homes?
Like, I took a screenshot from one home that had this one,
Yeah.
and I took a screenshot from the other home. I didn't want to take up all this script based on.
Oh, okay, so it's
Yeah.
two different instances. Okay,
Yeah, and
sorry.
they may actually be running, I don't know all of the details behind this experiment, but they may actually be running to see which one works better. It may turn out that like at different points in the product life cycle, they work better for different people, so that's
So,
what,
so in your experience,
Yeah.
is it good just to do one real social proof that's outstanding? Or is it better to do, hey, here's a couple of social proofs that are notable?
my hunch is that it might be distracting to have more than one, but once again, I'll kind of just say you should experiment. So maybe like two
Okay.
examples of social proof, one would work with one person and one would work with another. But you also just have people who have limited attention, so I would lead with your best foot.
May I ask you how you approach issues where the politically correct answer is so strong that people are afraid to give you an answer other than the politically correct answer?
Do you want to give me an
Obviously, the
example?
presidential election was a case there where only the LA USC Times polls, right? Because they asked people who they're going to vote for. And the only reason the USC poll was correct is they said, who do you think your neighbors are voting for? So you didn't have.
Yeah, I understand the question, and I think.
Today, and I give you the answer. Donald Trump is around 40% approval, but those guys at USC think his approval is probably 10 points higher because so much negativity is there that they're afraid to answer. And I thought it was only on white-collar people, but I'll talk even blue-collar people.
I understand the question.
So I'm not trying to have a political discussion, but I'm trying to say, where if you talk about, say, global warming, or you talk about some, electric cars, where it's such a politically correct, how do you get the real answers without? How do you approach that when you know that guy is probably looking to answer the way you want?
So the point of all of this work is that you're not asking people questions. If I said to somebody, would you rather have this or that? They'll tell me the answer they think I want to hear. The point of this work is it's done anonymously, silently, on your own phone, on your computer, and it's behavior. And that's why Kristen and I do the work we do, is because we question surveys. We question qualitative interviews. Instead, we like to lead with experimentation because when you vote or when you take an action for a sign-up flow, you're not thinking, what's the politically correct thing? What does the survey asker want me to say? You're doing the thing that you want to do. So this actually feels very free from that politically correct bias or trying to please someone. This to me is the antidote to that.
I could think something maybe like, I'm not concerned that we want to think that it's not the person on the other side as well. I'm not being judged, but in some cases, the machine will judge me. And so I'm trying to think of a scenario like insurance. Like, am I going to tell you some piece of information that will allow you to give me better service or whatever, but it may adversely impact in some way, I don't know, increased insurance premiums or something?
Yeah, I can see that. I can see people self-censoring, but from what we've found, this is actually the best possible way for people in the product space to get feedback on how people will behave, because it's them acting in a natural environment. So there may be examples of things, I think insurance is a good one where you might self-censor, but what we find most of the time is people are not self-conscious as they go through this, they're just responding in the way that they naturally respond, and that is highly informative for how you should be designing your products.
I would also just add that one of the more uplifting things about behavioral science is when you do two conditions, you'll have people in both conditions being equally dishonest. And so basically this says if you're testing one thing and it's not necessarily dishonesty, you'll learn about the thing you're testing. And we can assume that noise, noise is bad, but if we have enough conditions and enough power in our experiment, then we can really learn something about behavior, even though there may be some confounding factors, because the confounding factors happen across conditions. And that's actually an uplifting factor, that we're more alike than we are different, and across both conditions, with good randomization, we'll have that same effect. So maybe, I don't know how much time we have, but before we let you go, we can ask questions. It would be great if we all took like a little ethical oath together. So, Irrational Labs, we're a nonprofit. We think about behavioral science for good, focused on health, happiness, and well-being. Airbnb, the same thing. We really think about the key behavior that you're doing to increase a customer's well-being. So it's not about the product or the business profit, it's about how you design something that increases a customer's well-being. And really focus on that as you guys think about that key behavior. So we're gonna say, repeat after me.
Yeah.
I will use behavioral economics for good. I will pick a key behavior that increases my customer's well-being. Great, okay, thank you.
So how are we gonna have time to wrap it up? Okay. We're gonna wrap up, but you can find Kristen and I afterwards if you have specific questions. And I want to leave you with this thought, which is how can you use social proof to change behavior at your company and in your personal life? That's something really fun about behavioral economics, is it doesn't just have to change what you do at work. I think when Kristen and I were working together, our team collectively lost over 100 pounds using behavioral economics techniques. So this stuff's really powerful and you should apply it in your lives.
And join our team because you'll lose weight.
Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you guys for coming today. I hope you guys enjoyed the talk. Our next meetup is on September 7th. So we hope to see you there. You can sign up for it on Meetup. If you have any ideas for talks, speakers, or reviews, do let me Jeff or me know. And when you guys came in, you must have received a raffle ticket. So to close this, I would like to call in Jan to do the raffle.
We lost it. Lucky number 175-9474.
Jan.
175-9474. Bingo.